what I was thinking of doing was just sometimes I post some of these charts and my levels are already on it and the indicators are already on. And sometimes I think it can be a little bit confusing for folks. So what I was thinking is I would just start uh, a new chart from scratch and show you guys how I set it up. So this is it, obviously your background and color always kind of switch on and off to new layouts, but this is basically what you would see if you started fresh. It would have your green and red bars. So first thing I'm gonna do is probably change the volume. And on my charts, I have a different volume indicator. So if you look at my charts, the volume's actually split off. And that's for two reasons. One is this is relative volume, and the other reason is I like to be able to see the price. There's when you look at this chart, it just everything kind of just gets muddied sometimes. So when I'm looking at charts and price, I want to make sure um, that I can see the price, right? The total volume is important to me, especially on the lower time frames, but not really as important. What I'm looking at more so is not the total volume per chart, but rather where was volume given the specific price points. So I'm not necessarily as interested in how much volume was in this entire candle, more so where were the trades on that candle, right? So that's where you've got a couple of different options in terms of indicators. And I'm going to go over a couple of them. The fixed range volume profile can be really useful. Um, Most of my charts, you see this fixed range, the visible range, which basically shows you the volume for whatever's on your screen, right? Um, and I purposely wanted to just kind of go through all this and show you how I personally set it up because I think that's important, but also just bear with me because sometimes when I'm setting it up, I haven't done this in a year or two. Um, so what I did there was change the colors and then change the row size. I want to get a granular view of it. So what I can see there is where the volume is being transacted. So on a low time frame, you basically want to trade these gaps in volume. Well, you want to trade that on a high time frame too. But what you do essentially is you can use it at any level. One of the other things you probably want to change is just this POC line is sometimes I take it off, sometimes I just make it less bright. Um, but you can see that this is just an area historically, if you look at Bitcoin, that you're going to have a lot of volume. Now, most of my charts are on Binance. Binance had some screwy stuff with their volume, so sometimes if I'm going to look uh, at something like this high time frame, I'll just switch over to Bybit. And so essentially, what you're seeing here is uh, Bitcoin going back to you know way back when, and you can see where all the volume is, right? You can see that if we were to lose this level, there's just not a lot of support, and there's a realistic possibility that we end up in this 15 area, this 12 to 13 area, or down to 12. But essentially, the most basic of strategies would be to trade these volume gaps. Um, as you can see, this was a very fast drop, um, and this was a very fast drop. So if we were to go above 25K, the likelihood that we get up to 28K is relatively high, right? So um, on a high time frame, that's kind of what we're doing. Um, you can come in and see, on the daily chart, um, you can come in and kind of see what the structure is doing. You can see that we've been in this range on Bitcoin, and essentially what I do is I was start with zooming out even more. Um, and I'm looking for uh, more than one factor, right? If I'm gonna draw a support and resistance line, I want it to be significant. Like right here, you can see you're on the edge of a volume area. You've got a weekly close, a weekly open. You've got multiple wicks. This is going to be a key level for me. Um, Sometimes I vary the color from weekly to monthly levels. But you can see like you've got a touch here, you've got basically almost a touch there, you've got these two opens, you've got this touch here. Um, that's just going to be a level that's going to be important if we get to it. The other level that seems to be um, important here is somewhere in this area. You obviously want to have a level, and you would mark out your lows. The Not to say that you're definitely going to go there, but when you look at a chart that's zoomed in, you want to make sure that that level stands out and you know where that is. Um, so right now I would look at, okay, we have this resistance, and then I would zoom in. So we zoom in and we look at just this range, then you can start to see there's a gap in volume right here, and there's some decent stops right there. So I'd mark that. Um, and then obviously you've got these lows. You can't really ignore those. I think for me, you can see right there on the low today, there's a huge drop off in volume. Obviously, because we haven't spent a whole lot of time there, so I want to make sure I have that level. Um, and I think that's pretty good in terms of where the low time frame um, levels are. So you've got essentially if we go above you know 20.4, you can probably take a move up to 21, maybe even higher. If we were to lose this low, I really think we head down to those June lows. I don't necessarily expect crypto to just dump, but those are basically the levels that I'm looking at. And that's how I determine support and resistance. I do it on a monthly, a weekly, a daily chart. Um, I'm very rarely looking at a 30-minute chart to determine legitimate support and resistance, unless you're doing something like um, if you were to transfer that over and you want to look at APT, well, there's just nothing there, right? So you have to then just get more granular, and as you do that, the indicator will adapt and show you the volume for whatever's being shown on the screen. And all you're doing is trying to figure out where buyers and sellers are interacting, because that's where they're going to interact again. The next kind of interesting volume indicator that you can use is the fixed range. And again, this is all showing you the same information. It's just it may be easier to see on one format. So the fixed range, which you've seen on my charts this week, um, you click on the indicator, you click where you want to start, and then you click where you want to end. This is the volume for that exact range, right? And what this is showing me is from that low, it's showing me these yellow lines are my value areas. So 68% of the volume has been inside those lines. And essentially now what I've done is say, okay, the lines that I drew with my eyes are spot on, right? So now I have additional confluence to say, okay, if we start trading above, like this isn't accepting above that range, this is more so, but essentially understanding that if this level down here is lost, right, and we do more than just a wick down, that we are going lower. Um, so this is two ways to see the exact same information, but essentially showing you that these are the important levels. When you start trading outside of these levels, it means that there's been a shift in market sentiment and a shift in directional conviction. Um, Trading in between this is very, very difficult. But essentially, you've got a bunch of really good trade setups. This is probably the best trade setup right here. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the rejection. This gave you four chances to get short and go right to the bottom. Now, if we fail to lose this level, right? If if my thought process is we keep seeing these lower highs, it keeps just getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So I think we are heading down. But if we don't head down and we do bounce and we go past this 20.4 level, then the statistical likelihood is that we go up to 21.8. And we test the high of that value area. Now, and then you would reassess then. If you start trading above that, then maybe you make a bigger move up. But that's what I'm doing. I'm just looking at where the high time frame key levels are on just the bar chart, and then I'm adding in the volume to give me context, and then trying to trade in between that volume. But this is a little bit simpler because you're in a range, right? And so when you're in a range, the support and resistance becomes pretty straightforward. If you were trading a trend, right? So if you were trading this downside, you would do the same thing in terms of here's a support, here's a support or resistance. Once the support is lost, so you're acting as support here. Once you lose it, then that now becomes resistance, and you see a bigger move down. Um, it's a little bit more challenging in a trend, and what you would want to do is just add some additional context to your volume. So the next thing I would add would be the VWAPs. Um, you have to adjust these things to the time frame because you don't need a daily VWAP on a weekly chart, right? Um, I use the daily when I'm trading in terms of when I'm actually actively trying to find an entry. I will use the daily on like a 15-minute or hourly chart, but on my high time frame charts, I'm not really looking at it. So what does the VWAP add? The VWAP is the volume weighted average price. The yellow right now is the yearly. You've got the daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly can be added. And essentially from here, what I can do is just get an idea of the trend, because when VWAP is flat, that's telling you that you're in a range and you're more likely to succeed with mean reversion trades from the extremes. When VWAP is um, going up or down, that means that you're trending. So right now we can see our monthly, quarterly VWAPs 3 weeks into the quarter and the week is flat. We're ranging. There's no sense in taking a swing position here because the market isn't doing anything. Um, all the market is doing is just bouncing back and forth. And these things become a little bit more helpful when you look at uh, a lower time frame chart because they still tell you the same thing and they kind of keep you in check, right? If I'm looking at a 30-minute chart and I'm thinking, you know, that we're going to get some movement, well, I look right here at these view ups and I say, okay, well, no, we're not trending. We're very much still in the chop and range. Um, these view ops are going to act as support and resistance. That I use them more so for taking profit. Sometimes I use them for entries if there is a reason to. But generally speaking, trading from VWAP, you want to trade a shift. So if something has been above VWAP and it's now lost it, you can, but you don't want to necessarily just be trading. It's no different than a moving average or an EMA. There's certain number of algorithms that are trading these VWAPs, and so they're helpful. But also keep in mind that you can open a Bybit chart, and you can open a Binance chart, and you could open spot versus futures and have different VWAPs. Some of my charts uh, even differentiate VWAPs based on order price. So I may be looking at the difference in VWAPs of total orders versus VWAP of orders only $250,000 and above, right? You can anchor your VWAPs. There's any number of things you can do, but just understand that in the general scheme of things, I'm looking at the daily to give me an idea of low time frame trend, and I'm usually have the higher time frame VWAP because that's what's telling me immediately what's happening. And the thing is that you have to set up your charts in a way that if I'm going to go look at alts, right, I'm going to set my chart up. I'm going to turn my volume on, right? And I'm just going to start scrolling through. And so your charts have to be set up in a way that you can see these things easily and it's not noisy. Um, so that is how I set up my charts. That's how I draw my support and resistance. Um, I never draw a support and resistance chart like line on a 15-minute chart. Sometimes I do it on the 4 hour, but that would be as low as I would go. Most of them are drawn on a daily, and most of them are done on a very zoomed out chart. Um, I think you get better at it when you watch the charts enough, but it's not something that you really want to be doing uh, on those really, really low time frame charts. But yeah, that's how I set it up. That's how I do it. I don't think that there's a whole lot of sense in uber complicating. Um, I'm just looking at areas that are very, very likely to get reaction from the market. Um, and they generally tend to be pretty good. Sometimes I'm impatient and don't wait for it. But generally speaking, if you trade level to level and do a good job with your levels, you're gonna do pretty well. So that's kind of what I wanted to discuss, just a very basic overview of how I do support and resistance. Um, and then just open it up and answer questions and go over any charts that you guys want to go over. Yes. Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody have any charts that they want to look at? I'm not sure who's I can't see anybody not that's not muted, but don't know. But does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any charts that they want me to look at? Gosh, I feel like we should do more. I'll give folks a minute to ask questions if they have any. But let me see. You can obviously, uh, I'm not saving that chart, but you can uh, save your charts, save your templates. Sometimes I have a alt template or a BTC template, but essentially this is what my charts right now are looking at, and I can see that XRP is in a consolidation area. I think that if we drop below this VWAP, we can see a bigger drop. APT is, I mean, it's so ridiculous. But it just looks like it wants to go higher here. But this is probably the big chart because uh, this will be the second rejection for ES at this level, and if it doesn't reclaim it, after lunch, then I think we get a new low of the day. Um, but we'll see. Um, uh, I'll ask one more time if anybody has any questions, or if anybody has any charts that alts or otherwise that they want me to take a look at. I'm happy to do it. Well, if you guys end up having any questions, we'll post it to the YouTube once it's processed. And if anybody has any questions after the fact, just tag me, and I'm happy to try and look at it or answer any questions. If you have any questions about any of the other indicators that I use, I have the OBV on here on my other charts. I have CVD, and on my tick-based charts, they're a little bit more complicated and have some different stuff. But uh, that'll be a topic for another day. Yeah, hope you guys uh, got something out of that. If you have any questions, just let me know.